when you mentioned, and you think about Raw Underground, it's just an instantly fast forward moment of the show. And again, I think similar to the paper, if you don't see it, what do you miss out on? I haven't seen Raw this week, or all of it. What do you miss out on? And what's the storyline? It's incoherent. It's not a bad storyline. It's incoherent.
Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling into submission, episode 7. And we're back. On this episode, we're going to be reviewing the recent WWE PPV Clash of Champions, where we had some interesting turn of events. We're going to have our finger on the pulse, talking all things hot topics in the world of professional wrestling. And there's certainly plenty of them at the moment. And we're also going to be having our documentary in review, looking back at the life and times of the Road Warriors, aka the Legion of Doom, after the sad recent passing of Animal. Right, so as always, keep up to date with us on the social media. We're on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter at Wrestling Rebooked or hashtag Wrestling Rebooked. Co-host today, shooting from the hip, definitely not looking to find his way out of an ambulance, spot monkey Andeve.
I suppose that's my cue, is it? Hi, mate. Thanks for the introduction there. Yeah, good. So I suppose we're going to be talking about Clash of Champions first, a pay-per-view that we talked last time about booking paradox and is WWE going in the right direction. I would suggest that Clash of Champions, along with some of the improvements in the weekly episode shows, maybe it is going in the right direction. But for me, it felt mostly like an irrelevant pay-per-view, despite the fact there were some good bits to it. It felt like it was mostly irrelevant. So interesting to get down and talk about that and see what you think.
Just irrelevant in the sense that there's been so many pay-per-views and so much moves along at a quick speed that you sort of blink and you miss it. It doesn't matter.
Partly that. Certainly the blink and you miss it. I mean, it doesn't always feel like you need to tune into these shows because you're going to miss out if you don't. You know, you can almost catch it. You know, catch a review later and then think, okay, fine, I'll just dip into these couple of matches. But more in the sense that not that there's so many pay-per-views. I mean, one a month should be really doable, but actually the fact that just not a lot happens in them. And I think that's partly because the storylines that drive them in between are not that exciting.
Not that engaging.
No.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into it, shall we? Clash of Champions kicked off with the ladder match. Kicked off at 100 miles an hour. Sami Zayn versus AJ Styles versus Jeff Hardy for the Intercontinental title. And what a match it was. 26 minutes, 35 seconds. Ladder match, Andeve.
Well, you know me, absolutely love a ladder match. I think it's as a gimmick. I know you like a one-on-one mat clinic, a few submissions, a little bit of slow down in the middle with a nice hit the finish and end. But as a gimmick match, I just can't think of anything better. I don't see anything better than a ladder match. It's endured really well, where all the other gimmick matches, and we'll talk about the ambulance match as well, don't really seem to be as enduring or the stars as innovative in them. I think ladder matches really work, really put over stars. And when you've got three workers and vets like Zayn, Styles and Hardy in it, they'll struggle. They'd struggle to make it a bad match, and it certainly wasn't. It was a really great match as far as I'm concerned. There wasn't much to dislike about it, unless you've got an alternative view.
Well, let's go through it, shall we? I think if we start with the positives, there are some really creative spots here, and for a gimmick match that has been absolutely done to death over the last few years, they actually done a pretty good job of pulling this off. So how did we get here in the first place? the angle was actually pretty good. Having Zayn come back after his extended period away from the ring totally, and then him come back and claim the title, claim what he thought was his title, and then interweaving Jeff and Styles. It was a nice sort of engaging way to get us to the point where we actually wanted to see this match, which you can't say for a lot of matches on the card. It was a bit of a shame that they just threw the triple threat away to some extent on the SmackDown episode the week before. But nevertheless, once that match got into its flow, as far as ladders matches go, I actually enjoyed it. The way they were coming up with Jeff on his ear, Sammy having the key to the handcuffs in his mouth, some of the stunts that Hardy, the dangerous stunts, let's be honest, that Hardy was pulling off. Fantastic.
Yeah, I think you're definitely on something in terms of the storyline. That is somewhere where WWE has improved a lot lately, especially around the title pictures, of which the Intercontinental title is arguably the second biggest or the biggest in the company historically, really. No one really knows why Zayn was off on screen, apart from the fact it was COVID off screen. But I mean, that's good that they just brought him back, and actually he was the uncrowned champion. Hardy had a bit of a false start coming back with Sheamus, but his storyline since then has been solid around the IC. And of course, if Styles is in the mix, then you've got good stuff. So the build to it was really good. Interesting. You mentioned the triple threat on SmackDown, because if I remember rightly, Zayn actually won that. And normally the person that wins the match to look strong before the pay-per-view doesn't end up winning the match. So there was a nice little bit deviation from the script there. Loads of good moments, really. I thought Zayn had lots of offensive moments throughout. They did, they opened with a move with all three of them involved. And I think sometimes with triple threats, what you end up with is one person lying on the canvas for 5 minutes while the other two go a one-on-one match, and then, change the dance around and someone else is lying on the canvas. Well, actually they made good use of the three of them. All three of them were involved in various bits. Some good moves off the top rope, a couple of moves of the ladder. Zayn sort of from the opening bell, was really good. Styles, he hit a decent forearm onto the ladder. Hardy sliding down the ladder, all that stuff. I thought it was really, really innovative. And you say it's been done to death, but I mean, I think it's a long way from its death, to be honest. There's just, despite the fact you've got Money in the Bank pay-per-view every year, they're still coming up with loads and loads of different ways to elevate these matches, no pun intended, and introduce new moves, new ways of using the ladders. I mean, Hardy was, I think, said sliding down the ladder at one point, and the handcuff stuff at the end. Sometimes there's handcuff stuff, it's a bit nonsense, but actually handcuffing him through the ear. What's going on, poor Jeff Hardy? And actually pretty good, because when he pulled down the two titles, which Cole said he had to at the beginning, just in case someone was watching the first time and couldn't work out themselves. Actually, it was good because all three of them were still in the mix and in the ring. And often you find that they're just disappeared and someone pulls it and, there you go. But actually, with all three of them there, especially with no crowd, I thought it worked really well. So I think it was it's a fantastic opener. Obviously, it sets the bar for the show very hard for anyone that's following, which we'll talk about. But I thought as a three-way dance with the ladder involved and those stars, it was superb, and it was given a good run time, and it deserved that time.
Yeah.
If you were to change it in any way, how would you change it?
So, there's a couple of things I just wanted to pick up on that. And part of the problem for me is actually in what you're saying, in that we've become so accustomed and almost numb to the ladder matches now, that there's two ways you can sell the ladder match, right? You can have loads of bumps where they are smashing ladders into bodies all the time, and you can keep the pace of the match going, and you can keep coming up with those innovative different ways to keep all three of them involved, which I agree was good. But in doing that, you basically have to say, okay, I'm going to give you this ladder shot across the back, across the chest, wherever, around the legs. But in doing that, you sell it for maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds, and then you're up onto the next one. So the impact of the ladder as a weapon, as a foreign object, just gets totally denounced, because you're just smashing people with ladders all the time. No one's selling it, or selling it very little, and then you're up onto the next spot. And there's only so many times you can get away with that.
Yeah, I think what you're saying there is fair comment. What I would say is that that's how wrestling has evolved, and we're no longer in 1989. So snooker's doing moves off the top of a cage. Now these days, people are doing that just in your everyday match. The super kick was Michael's finisher, and he's not actually that long retired. But yet now you see multiple super kicks in matches. DDT used to be a finisher. Now DDT is just a casual 2 count halfway through a match. So I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I don't really think it matters. I mean, I certainly don't mind it. Obviously a spot monkey, but for me, that's absolutely fine. I don't want to be hit with a ladder and then be out for the 1, 2, 3 indefinitely. Given the nature of the match, they've got to get back up, and it's got to be quick paced, and so they've got to be short lived on the floor.
Yeah. Ultimately, what I'm saying is, if you're going to have a ladder match, this is how it's got to be booked.
Oh, I agree. As this one, right? Yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
I suppose was the last. I mean, forgetting Money in the Bank. The last ladder match we saw. There was the one on NXT for Keith Lee's North American. I mean, he wasn't in the match, so I suppose it wasn't his anymore. But North American title, which I can't remember if we talked about in one of the previous podcasts. But you weren't really a fan of, were you? But I mean, I was still, because it was a ladder match, so I enjoyed it.
And if we were to sit here and dissect that match, I dare say most of the arguments would be pretty much the same.
Yeah. So I guess we're seeing the same thing. It just depends how much you enjoy that, right?
Right.
And for me, ladder matches are fantastic. I'd have a ladder match on every card, and you definitely can't say that for. If you think about the Hell in a Cell gimmick and how that's just been watered down over the years. They are introducing a few other things, like the scaffold match in Thatcher's Pit, that sort of thing. So they are trying to introduce some sort of stuff. But even the Elimination Chamber, since they had all the tag teams in there and that sort of stuff, the other gimmicks I just don't think have endured as well as the ladder match. And I just absolutely love watching them. And I thought this one, I sort of already knew I was going to enjoy it before I watched it, and I certainly enjoyed it anyway, even though I'm obviously heavily biased in terms of the fact it's a ladder match.
Yeah. Interesting you mentioned scaffold match. We'll get to a scaffold match a bit later on in the episode. Okay, how are you rebooking?
Me? I don't think I am. Let it run for another 10 minutes, maybe. I think it's excellent. I suppose maybe thinking about, and it's not something I really think about very much, but thinking about the show as a whole, if you're opening with that match, then you're basically giving the next 2 matches at least no chance to really get the crowd involved, pop for the crowd. You're sort of setting them up to fail. So maybe it doesn't go on first, but equally, what a great way to start a pay-per-view. So I don't know. I'm not really rebooking it at all. You?
Well, obviously, I come up with a rebooking angle that involved no ladders. I quite like to have seen Zayn and Hardy go at it. I mean, the angle, as I mentioned before, is good enough for those two to sort of play out a number of weeks of SmackDown and then come to actually just have a one-on match. You could then phase in Styles or whatever new challenger thereafter. And those two would have torn the house down.
So you watched that match, you enjoyed that match, but you'd rebook it by taking out the ladder and let them go one-on-one and then one-on-one again.
You got that absolutely correct.
Oh, I think you've got that absolutely wrong, but fair enough. That's. I mean, I hear where you're coming from. So, yeah, I just 100% don't agree, but fine.
Asuka versus Zelina Vega for the Raw Women's title. 7 minutes and 5 seconds, a considerably shorter match. So I'll kick us off.
Yep.
I think we need to be very careful about how we're booking Zelina Vega here. She's very small. She had had very little exposure in terms of in-ring. But nevertheless, she's clearly talented and clearly had a lot of both in-ring and just generally as a performer. We've seen today that she's been doing some good stuff as a manager. Okay, the plan is now to bring her in as an in-ring performer and give her a bit of a push, fine. But there's going to be very little wiggle room before she's going to just be totally buried and lost in the shuffle like so many others. And I think they're in danger here with this match and the way they put it over. I agree that Asuka should have won as it was booked, but burying Zelina in the process. not a great start.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there. In terms of the match itself, sometimes it felt a little bit slow, even though it was only the 7 minutes. And I suppose, as we've just alluded to, they were set up to be a toilet break or whatever, having followed that first match. I thought Zelina Vega did okay. I wasn't particularly impressed. She did okay. There's a little bit of a moment she'd flick over into an arm bar and it looked quite fluid, and thought, okay, that's not too bad. And of course, it's a fresh matchup. So one thing that WWE, particularly on Raw at the moment, is really struggling for is fresh matchups. But it was an obvious end. It was obviously the right end, but it was also an obvious end to get to, with the Asuka lock and Zelina tapping. Haven't really done enough to build her in terms of her split from a boys backstage. There's not really been much storyline there. And this is where the pay-per-view, for me, they're going in the right direction, and there were some good matches on it, but it's just sort of wholly irrelevant, this. And after it's finished, doesn't do anything for the title, for Asuka, for Zelina. If it's not on the card, does it make any difference? No. So, it's not really a ringing endorsement of a wrestling match there.
Certainly wouldn't have looked out place on the kickoff show, would it?
No, exactly.
I agree. I think Zelina does have a moveset, a Hurricane Rana looks very good again for a size. She does it very well. But they made a few errors in this match in terms of booking, like having these still steps involved, and it just comes back of the ladder match. Just look ridiculous as a gimmick. But in terms of rebooking, for me,
I guess.
Zelina,
Go on, sorry.
It was probably just a bit too early for her to be having this match. It could have been her and the story. It was really in the story with Asuka. Not a great deal of chemistry between the two. So I think that really could have been built a little bit more before we got here. But of course, we're in an age where we just do everything now.
Yeah, I think that point is up.
One last point I'll make is that there was an opportunity around about a month ago when Bianca Belair was fresh in on Monday Night Raw, working with the Street Profits. There's an opportunity there to start building her. Took the foot off the gas for whatever reason. I'm sure there may be a legitimate reason. She would have been the one to have a showdown with Asuka.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt. I got a bit excited there when you were saying about the pace of that Zelina's suddenly in that main event, and actually, where does she go from here? Is that her first match? It's her first match for a while. I'm struggling to think. Yeah, and she's straight into the title scene, which she's lost fairly convincingly, fairly easily, and without putting on a great show. So where does she go from here? She's back down the card. If I'm rebooking it, I mean, if you miss the show, and really that's what you want from a TV show. You want to be able to tune in and realize that there's stuff happening here. And if you miss it, you're missing out on something. Well, if you miss this show and tune on to Monday Night Raw, or didn't even know this match was on the card, there's no difference once it's over. So for me, the rebooking, I would just get rid of it. I would just get rid of it off the pay-per-view. And then the trouble is that's true for a number of the next matches, which sort of calls into question what's the point of the pay-per-view. So for me, rebooking, I just eliminate it. I don't think it did very much for anybody. And in the long term, it's probably going to actually harm Vega.
Gold Rush, Andeve. Every title is going to be defended. So
fair enough. But I mean, why doesn't she defend it against someone?
Yeah,
that's worth defending it against.
Yeah. Okay. Apollo Crews versus Bobby Lashley for the US title. Got a bit longer, 8 minutes 15 seconds for this one. Kick us off.
Yeah, the first thing I thought about with this was, what has Ricochet been reduced to? A valet come into the ring that, with not much fanfare, he barely got involved in the match. If you're going to have Ricochet on a pay-per-view, have him do something, even if it's just for the spot monkey. He can do some flips or something, or take out MVP. All they did was have a conversation at ringside. So Ricochet has been totally reduced from the one and only and the star to absolutely nothing, which is unbelievably fantastic booking in the sense of, how do you even manage to do that to Ricochet? How do you reduce him to nothing? They shot him up from NXT. Speaks to your point about Vega being used too quickly. They shot him up from NXT. having put him in NXT despite all his success around the crowd previously, and now he's just walking to the ring with Apollo Crews, who's a challenger for the US title. So that for me was the first thing that struck me. The match itself, I think Apollo's been on a fairly decent run. He did an overhead sort of drop on Lashley, which showed some good strength, and he's got a few flips and kicks that are okay. I thought Lashley sold an elbow strike by him quite poorly, but other than that, this match for me, again, if you didn't watch this show and you just turned up on Raw and saw Lashley with the title, what have you missed out on? We've seen this match, this feud, many times before. It's been going on for ages, including if you chuck MVP in the mix. We're talking a good 3-4 pay-per-views there. So for me, the match itself was fairly non-distinct. What I would say, which is slightly goes against what I have been saying, but what I would say is the feud has worked, but it's definitely time to end it now. I mean, the feud has done a lot for Lashley. It's done a lot for Apollo Crews. It's done a lot for the Hurt Business. And it's done a lot for the title. So in that sense, the feud itself and the back and forths, all of those people are now, the Hurt Business, the title, are on sort of mainstays on Raw and pay-per-views. But the match itself, take it or leave it, in which case you might as well leave it.
I thought the match was all right for what it was, for the 8 minutes that they had. I would suggest that the first match massively ran over what it was supposed to, and then they were playing catch-up. But nevertheless, I agree. If you're going to have Ricochet and MVP at ringside coming into the match, at least have the heels get some extra heat or something, or have Ricochet jump in the ring and bring something to the table. Otherwise, just what's the point? There's no point in being there. The match itself was okay. I think Lashley looks absolutely fantastic. I'm still not sold on his finisher, the Hurt Lock, which is basically a full Nelson, right?
Yeah, they don't really know what to do with him for his finisher. He had a spear for a little bit. I don't know if that was his finisher, the Dominator type thing, but no, I'm not sold. Again, this might sound a bit stupid, but when Brock Lesnar hits the F5, you feel like you don't want that move done to you. Or when Bret Hart's putting people in the sharpshooter, you can feel it, especially when you've then been put on it in the playground at school or whatever. Yeah. Whereas that full Nelson, you just sort of think that's something I'd do to Hugman Nan.
Yeah. Apollo Crews needs to stop doing all these flips as well. They just look awkward and don't fit his style.
Don't you think his style is about flips though? I mean, that's what he's sort of billed as.
Yeah, but I don't think it should be.
What would you have him do? Just run around like a mini Lashley?
I'd actually have him as a heel. I think he'd be a better heel. And sort of come into the ring as he does with his kind of cheesy gimmick. And then as soon as you change him heel, you can just change his style.
Right, that's fair enough. I think it was Heyman that was big on him, wasn't it? That's why he got the push originally, and obviously then Heyman got the push out. I think he's come across well. This has been his best run on the main roster. He was called up very quickly, like Ricochet, and there's a bit of a theme there that they have all these people coming up in NXT, and it's a bottleneck because now there's so many stars there. You look at Keith Lee's not even on the pay-per-view, and he's the double champion a few weeks ago. So yeah. All right. I would just so you're rebooking that how having just a bit more in-ring, out-ring interference.
Yeah, the title's got us down Lashley. The Hurt Business are fantastic at the moment on Monday Night Raw, which I guess we'll get to in the next section. So the result was right. If I'm rebooking, I just like Ricochet and MVP to actually be a bit more involved in the match.
Yeah, fair enough. I suppose if I'm rebooking that, I'm sort of scrubbing half the pay-per-view. But again, I think for what it was, I agree with you. It was decent. It's fair enough. But was it necessary? Did it change direction of things? Have we seen it before? I'd be happy to scrap it. Yeah,
fair. All right. The Street Profits. It's Andrade and Angel Garza. That was for the Raw Tag Team titles. 8 minutes and 15 seconds for this one as well. I suppose here we go again with the Street Profits. And we've kind of done this one to death in terms of their style and what they bring to the table. For me, this match was all about getting the titles on Andrade and Angel Garza. think they've been doing some good stuff on Raw. They've got good dynamic, good chemistry between the two. They've decided to move on from Selena, and all we got was another loss. So it's a big misstep in my view. That was the time to switch the belts. But beyond that, another forgettable match on this card, to be honest.
Yeah, again, if you don't watch the pay-per-view, what have you missed out on? And what you've missed out on is one of the Street Profits actually said we've been dealing with these fools since before WrestleMania. So I don't know if that's WWE trying to lift the veil there, but I mean, we all know that as well. We've been dealing with them for ages and ages with not much happening, a bit of back and forth. A few storylines dropped along the way, like the poisoning that Vega did, or when Orton turned up with them one week. Again, if you don't watch the PPV, what have you missed out on? Decent Spanish fly. Everyone loves a Spanish fly, surely. So there was a decent Spanish fly off the top rope. Pretty good. But the only thing of note in this match, which I haven't seen all of Raw, so I don't know if this is deliberate or not, but it certainly looked on the screen. I mean, it was true that Andrade kicked out on 2.5 or whatever. Yet they still took the pin. And Cole and that on the replays were saying, well, that looks like 2, and there was a bit of confusion at the end of the match. Have they done anything with that on Raw? Was that deliberate? Have they mentioned it? Have they referred back to it?
So I have seen Raw. Would you like to guess what they might have done?
Well, hopefully. Well, I don't know. I don't want to see another match between them, to be honest. But I would assume that they come to the ring, Andrade and Garza, and they complain that it wasn't a 3 count, and here's some footage from the night, and they demand the rematch.
I mean, that would have been a good way to go, right? I mean,
apart from the fact they don't want to see it, yeah.
It's quite an engaging way to sort of draw the crowd in and make people wonder, hey, was this a legit count or what? But no, it was not referenced.
So what was it then?
Andrade cut a promo on Zelina after her match with Asuka, which incidentally she lost again, and said that she was the weak link. It was her that cost them their titles, and he wanted nothing to do with her. And that was the end of it. So
no mention of the kick out at all.
Nada.
What does that suggest? That it was an accident, or
I correct myself. That wasn't the end of it. Keith Lee came out and had a match with Andrade.
Keith Lee came out.
Yeah.
Oh, that's handy. Presumably he battered him with a spirit bomb. With that new music as well.
Correct.
So if that's a botch, they could have definitely incorporated that into the storyline. That would have actually been quite decent. Or they could have at least referred to it and moved on. But instead, we've all just seen this 2 count and the shoulder up, and they've just ignored it, have they?
Correct.
Yeah. So there you go. Then you don't need to watch the pay-per-view. The titles are still on the Street Profits, and the one bit that was interesting from the match has been ignored. So there you go. If I'm rebooking, I've got a decent first match, and I've got a big void in the middle of my pay-per-view at the moment.
I can't disagree. Move on?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, next match was advertised as Bayley versus Nikki Cross for the SmackDown Women's title. That's not quite what we got. Nikki Cross absent, not medically cleared. Bayley hits the ring, cuts yet another very good promo. Her promo skills have been excellent. Issues the open challenge. That one's not been done to death recently, has it? But nevertheless, out comes Asuka, and they then have a shortened match before a double DQ, and Sasha Banks hits the ring and attacks Bayley. Thoughts?
WWE just doing the same thing it's been doing with the previous matches and just suffering from fatigue and lack of inventiveness. An open challenge, that's fair enough. That means you can get someone, just chuck them in the picture for one match and take things in a different way, deviate it from the script a little bit. Instead, Asuka comes out. Oh, great, here you go. Well, we saw a few pay-per-views ago fighting both Bayley and Banks. Now, and then there was some follow-up matches which both Bayley and Banks were involved in. Now she's fighting Bayley again, and I thought, well, can't be bothered with this. What's the point? But then it started, and it was a really frenetic pace to begin with, and there was quite high intensity, and started to get drawn into the match and think, yeah, okay, this could be exciting. They're both good good talent, good workers. Let's see what happens. And then just hit a DQ finish, because obviously once you think about it for a little bit, of course they do, because Asuka's not winning that and Bayley can't win that because Asuka's the champion. So you can't have your champion lose to the other champion because they'll look weak. So they have to have that DQ finish, and Sasha interrupts. So again, we've seen all this before. It doesn't move anything forward. And even the Sasha interruption, which is obviously what it's built for and what Bayley is building to, it just all feels a bit rushed. It was only very recently that she was being written off TV, and now she's running around in the neck brace. It's just, having taken so long to build to this implosion, they're sort of now throwing it away a bit quickly.
It's just panic booking for specifically the match at Clash of Champions. It was just panic booking. I don't know how soon they knew about Nikki, but from there on in, it just felt rushed, did it not?
What the situation is with COVID and travel restrictions, and like you say, how quickly they knew. But if you're having an open challenge, you don't want your title holder to turn up. You could have anybody else turn up just for a different and fresh match.
Absolutely.
And if you want to protect that person, say it's Rhea Ripley or someone, you can have Sasha Banks interrupt and smash Bayley, and then there's your disqualification, and you've seen a match you haven't seen on Raw and SmackDown and pay-per-views previously. It just again, WWE, we said, is going in the right direction, but you've got fourth match in a row there that just doesn't have a lot to it.
Yeah, I agree. Like, I mean, there's decent female talent on NXT roster. They could have had someone like Tegan Knox, Dakota Kai, just come and you'd have had a decent pop. Imagine there's a crowd there for someone on NXT, not expected, come up and challenge Bayley. Fantastic, job done. And you can still have your Sasha angle afterwards, which incidentally I thought was just a little too long. If they're going to absolutely nail this and get it exactly how they want it, then you're going to have extended beatdown from Sasha as the babyface. Just needs to come in, have a quick beatdown, get out of there, maybe Bayley get some heat back, done. It was just a bit too long, a bit dragged out, and that's clear.
I think
the booking effort.
I would say no crowd is really, obviously no crowd has hurt everything, all sports during the pandemic, and wrestling, of course, as well. I'd say this is particularly suffering from no crowd, because normally there'd be people. Do you remember when Lynch turned on Charlotte? The crowd was really up and going. Actually, here with no crowd, it's just lost that real spark and excitement. Bayley's still doing good heel work, but Sasha doesn't have the crowd to feed off in a sort of her face comeback. So I think it's really suffering from that. And at the end of a match that was, again, really nondescript and throwaway, take it or leave it.
Yeah, absolutely. And the longer that goes on, the worse it's going to get as well, with talent coming through. You'll be in a situation soon where you'll have stars coming up from NXT who won't even experience the crowd.
Yeah.
All right. So, Orton and McIntyre for the main WWE title. An ambulance match, of course. 21 minutes and 35 seconds for this. You enjoy an ambulance match, don't you?
Not really. I'm sort of pegged as someone that just wants gimmick match after gimmick match after gimmick match. Extreme Rules is my favourite pay-per-view. Give me more Money in the Bank. Not quite true. I think an ambulance match is a less favoured gimmick. Luckily, it doesn't turn up very much, but because of the nature of the match, chuck someone in the back of an ambulance, means you've got to get to the ambulance. And then people are, as Orton and McIntyre were at some points, wrestling with a door, which I suppose they do in a cage match, but at least a cage surrounds the ring. So not my favourite sort of gimmick match. It's no ladder match, but I did think that they did a pretty good job with it. What do you think?
Let's start with some positives. When McIntyre and Orton come out to their respective music, you look at the facials and the psychology that those two bring. It's absolutely fantastic. They were so engaging, both in each other and as just generally in-ring performers. Look at the physical specimens that they are as well. Absolutely.
Which one's your favourite physical specimen?
That's a great question. I think McIntyre.
He's a bit younger, isn't he?
Yeah, he's a little bit leaner than Randy, and maybe even a little bit taller. So McIntyre probably gets the nod in that respect. But they just have that edge, no pun intended, that when they come out and you're about to see them in whatever type of match they've got, this is going to be money compared to the dross of the last 3 matches before.
Yes, it does pick up again. I mean, you need to watch this to know what's going on in the pay-per-view. Actually, this one was done well. You're absolutely right. I thought Orton in particular, considering I don't know I still don't quite understand what that looks like when they come out to the ring. Can they see that? I mean, I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but his playing of the arena is superb, and it looks great with the way the pyro comes behind him and stuff. So yeah, I thought absolutely you're right there. The playing of the crowd of the arena was excellent from both of them, particularly Orton. And you also make you right in terms of it felt like 2 behemoths, 2 big, strong specimens smashing the hell out of each other. And even when they got those chairs and crutches involved, it felt like big hitting, hard hitting. And the match itself, I thought they did 3 things pretty well, actually. 3 things pretty well. First of all, the way they used the ambulance gimmick as part of the match. So just thinking back to the NXT car park match that Cole and Dream had, where there was a ring and it was poorly lit as well, but there was a ring, but they didn't really use it, and they ended up hitting each other with parking meters and things. And it just didn't. Yeah, and it just didn't really work. What you want to do is use the ring. As you do with a ladder match, you use the ring, but you incorporate the gimmick into it. And I thought actually with this ambulance match, they did incorporate the gimmick quite well. There was a few nice bits on the ambulance, on the windscreen. McIntyre Claymore in that door was pretty good. So I quite enjoyed how they used that gimmick, which is the first thing I thought was good about the match. And the second thing I enjoyed was the way they paid off the story. So obviously, I thought it was Retribution when Big Show turned up because he was in black wearing a mask. Yeah. But it wasn't instantly obvious what was going on. But obviously, once he turned up and chokeslam, you were waiting for Christian, Shawn Michaels, of course, and Ric Flair to turn up somewhere. And I was even thinking maybe Ric Flair's going to turn up and support Orton, and really that's what's going to get Orton the win. So I thought, although I didn't particularly think it was great that there was 4 run-ins, that's quite overbooked rather than rebooked. I actually think that's decent in terms of paying off the storyline. And then the third thing I would say before you fall asleep is that it had quite a dominant end in terms of they're really going in on McIntyre. And he had, I know that Orton has had interference there and McIntyre's had some support in winning, but the actual 1, 2, 3 or the ambulance at the end, McIntyre smashed him and chucked him in, and he still stood there. He's not lying on the floor, rolling around the floor. So actually, I thought that was good as well. The way that Randy has a bit of protection because they've all run in, but also McIntyre has had a dominant finish there.
They should be going in on McIntyre. If you're not going to have the title on him, who would you have it on? Plus, he's been since Mania. He's been pretty unlucky in the same breath because he's dealing in a COVID era, and he's carried that title pretty well. But the question I want to pose to you is based on what you're saying there. Would your opinion of this match be any different if you knew that this wasn't the end of the feud?
I'm expecting it, and I don't know if it says it on Raw. I'm expecting it not to be the end of the feud. I think it's not. The next pay-per-view might be Hell in a Cell, and I can certainly see this feud having run now over a number of weeks with what the heinous crimes that Orton's been up to, alongside McIntyre's. I mean, there was an episode of Raw where Orton put on the screen all the legends in hospital. It's absolutely fantastic. That's the best thing he's done. He's been kicking people in the head as well. I would assume that it maybe isn't the end. And with Hell in a Cell coming up, Orton can say, these people coming in here, won't be able to do interference. It'll just be me and you in the cell. Let's go. And then they can go all in on McIntyre, have him win that. And then he's looking like a champion and probably carrying the title through to WrestleMania next year. So I'm fine if it's not the end of the match. I think they've done it well because it was very different. Sorry, the end of the feud. It was very different to the one-on-one match they had where they didn't even hit any finishes in that first match. Then this one, which is, gimmick infused, but pays into the storyline. And then one more match. Yeah, fine.
It's what the crowd always want, isn't it? One more
But
match.
also, if you're not having one more match, it doesn't. It feels like there's not quite another challenger out there to really step in. So
Fair point.
Rollins was absent from the pay-per-view, but aside from him, I mean, he's obviously very busy with the Mysterio family and his disciples. But aside from him, who else is there? So I think another match is fine. I think this builds nicely as the second act in a three acts story. So yeah, I'm good with that. You?
Yeah, I have a few points to make. I think just before I do, though, there's a famous WWE draft on the way. So,
is there?
Other challenges? Yeah.
When is that? Next week, is it? Or?
Change.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. I think for the match itself, there's a fantastic line from Samoa Joe as they approached the ambulance for the first time, and I think it was Orton that produced a steel chair, of course, from the ambulance. Samoa Joe was like, "What kind of ambulance is this?" Absolutely fantastic. I think with ambulance matches, by definition, so much of it's going to be out of the ring. So you're just going to be plodding around the arena, and they went backstage, sort of flirting with a buffet, a specifically placed buffet for a bit. Yeah, it's all right for what it is. But
it's lucky that Ric Flair can drive ambulances, isn't it? I don't know how what license he's got for that, but it's good that he can. He's gone from driving limousines or being in the back of limousines to now driving ambulances at 70 odd. But I mean, at least if he gets COVID because he's working all the time, he's close to ambulance and medical help.
Yeah, he wasn't likely to break the speed limit either, was he?
I don't think so.
I thought McIntyre took the gimmick windscreen spot very well.
Yeah, that was good.
And the actual, if you're going to have, again, similar to the ladder match, really, if you're going to have an ambulance match, I think the actual finish was okay for what it was. So, couldn't really have booked it any different if you're going to be having ambulance matches.
I agree, yeah.
Main event, Jey Uso against Roman Reigns.
Is it Jey Uso, is it? Sure it's not Jimmy?
Let's go with Jey Uso against Roman Reigns for the Universal title main event. 22 minutes and 55 seconds. What do you think, Goose?
I think it's amazing that for so long I've wanted Roman Reigns nowhere near the title scene, nowhere near my TV screen. Then he disappears for a while. I think maybe he should come back, and then he comes back as a heel, and it's only a slight nuance change to his character. And obviously they've paired him with Heyman, so he's a little bit more interesting than he was. But suddenly, I'm really interested in what Roman Reigns is up to. Which, why didn't they turn him heel after he beat The Undertaker? What were they waiting for? Why have they pulled the trigger now? But I guess at least they have pulled the trigger. This was a pretty decent match, I thought. Again, based on the sort of, what if you missed the pay-per-view? What have you missed? Well, actually, you have missed something here, and it links a bit to the previous in the sense that there's been a nice build to this. Uso is a good challenger. Maybe you don't think he's necessarily going to win the title, but actually the storyline is quite good. It gives Reigns a bit of momentum and actually adds to his heel antics. Interesting. I think that's the first time ever I've seen Reigns not wearing his shield vest. So that was interesting, and he looked in good shape, to be fair to him. He's obviously been using his time off well. I thought most of the match, it was fairly obvious that Uso wasn't going to win before and during. Most of the match was pretty fair. I thought there was one moment that really captured the dynamic where Uso chops Reigns and Reigns sort of goes, "What are you doing?" and then lands a punch, and Uso sells it fantastically, and it really showed the different power dynamic there. Then the comeback was quite good. For a moment, you lost yourself in it and thought, hold on, is Uso going to get this? I don't know if you noticed, he did a frog splash, and he didn't lie flat. He also bounced back up, so maybe Ford deserves a bit more kindness there. But mostly, pretty good. Quite enjoyed it. Reigns' trash talk as well is good. The only thing that I think let this down is the ending. I thought the ending was a bit naff. In fact, the ending was very naff as well, because it's also the ending of the pay-per-view. But for the match generally and the story and everything, I thought it was quite a good effort.
Fair. From the top, I agree with you. I think this had the best build. It was the most compelling storyline-wise. They dealt with many feuds down the years involving some sort of family dynamic. In fact, they have more than one ongoing in the company at the moment with the Mysterios. But nevertheless, this was built pretty well. I was actually sat there in front of this thinking, I want to see this. I agree, the change of gear for Reigns just gives him that little edge. Looks in fantastic shape and obviously shows off his tribal tats. And it was quite nice to see in the match itself, Jey Uso sort of fight from underneath and sort of build up a few hope spots where you thought maybe he could fight back and get the win. It was booked exactly how it needed to be booked as well, like a fairly slow pace, Reigns doing lots of trash talking, just sort of slapping Uso around.
Yeah.
It was quite compelling in that way, like total break from not only the PPV but from the norm, and it just made it a little bit different, a little bit interesting. I agree though, there were a few moments, mostly towards the end of the match, which left a little bit of a sour taste. Reigns hit 2 huge spears on Uso. He absolutely went flying, but of course didn't sell it for much more than a few seconds. On comes the low blow, and he sells it for the next 5 or 6 minutes. It's just small technical things that could just be ironed out for their inevitable next match in Hell in a Cell. If you've seen this,
do you think that's what's happening? They're going to have a Hell in a Cell, are they?
Yes, as of the 2nd of October episode of SmackDown. That was the promo from Reigns.
What, the same two?
How do you mean?
They're gonna have a rematch basically, but in Hell in a Cell.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, fair enough. What did you think? What's the point of the ending then? Because I don't understand why someone can. I know it's his partner, it's Jimmy or Jay. One of them's come down the ramp and thrown in the towel, but they weren't part of the match. And if you're going to end the match like that, then why are you then going to chuck them in Hell in a Cell?
Yeah. With the Friday 2nd October's episode of SmackDown, kind of there's some way to iron that out.
Right. Okay.
Reigns cuts a promo about how Jey he loves him. He's his brother. He's been not his brother, it's his cousin. Known him since forever. Does everything for him. Got him in the main event. Give him a big payday. Allows him to do things for his family, etc., etc., etc. Jey Uso says about more than that, and it all paths lead to fighting again.
It's quite a good heel turn, isn't it? Because it could easily have just come back and been Reigns saying, "Oh, I'm much better than everybody. Like, the fans have never cared for me," all that sort of stuff. But actually, it's much more subtle than that, and it works really well. He's the same character. He's sort of being kind, but he's also being dominant. It actually really works. I guess. Yeah, I'm interested to see that another one of those matches. Is it going to be a handicap match, or do you think he's going to be 1-on-1?
So the cliffhanger of SmackDown was that this is going to have the biggest consequences in WWE.
What, the matches?
Yeah.
For who?
Who knows?
WWE. Reigns is going to kill his cousin, is he? What do they mean?
The highest possible stakes, I think the word's used.
Fair enough. Well, that'd be interesting then.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Rebooking, I actually could have gone a totally different direction here and had Uso turn with Reigns and side with him, and then you could have introduced another challenger. Would have been another way could have taken this in a different direction. Yourself?
Well, I wonder if that might come further down the line.
Yeah.
Reigns is so dominant they choose to join him. I just wouldn't have. I see exactly what they're trying to accomplish with the end. Reigns is dominant force. Can't stop him. Just don't have the other cousin come down and throw the towel in. Just have Reigns win by knockout, which you don't see very much, right? You could do a 3 count and say he can't continue that. You've won. That's how I would change it. I think mostly you keep it the same. But just that ending. And also remember, that's the pay-per-view going off the air. So the last thing you remember is someone hobbling down the ring, thrown in a towel. No, just have Reigns 1, 2, 3, celebrate with him, technical knockout, celebrating in the corner. That's what I'd have. Yeah.
I think general closing thoughts on PPV is one of the better ones we've seen in recent months. There are, I think it's a phrase you used previously, green shoots of good stuff happening in WWE. There's some fantastic talent. We've put on some good matches, and you can see some of the creative that's going into that has been thought out, and that's all really you want.
Yeah, I think green shoots recovery. We're talking about, is WWE going in the right direction? The Reigns heel turn has been pretty good. SmackDown tag time. In fact, SmackDown is a very watchable show at the moment. Hurt Business are sort of moving in the right direction. They've done some good stuff. So there's elements of the show that were good. But top and tail it, outside of that, the main events or the title matches and the the Intercontinental title match. The others might have been Clash of Champions, but no one was interested in the Clash, and no one came out looking like champions. I think the middle of the pay-per-view you could just scrub, and then you actually, do you need a pay-per-view at all if that's what you're talking about? And if it's imminently missable, then just miss it out as a pay-per-view. So I think they just need to try a little bit harder in creative and booking in terms of thinking, how do you engage in the pay-per-view across it? But it probably was better than, I mean, it doesn't say much, does it? But some of the previous efforts in recent months, but they've still got a long way to go to make a show top to bottom interesting and engaging.
Agree. Time to move on?
Yep.
All right, section 2, episode 7, Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling into submission. And we've got our finger on the pulse again. Hot topics was stick with WWE and some of the ongoings at the moment. Some Monday Night Raw have been trying a few different ways creatively to try and engage us viewers in this COVID era. And they've introduced Retribution as a terrorist group that have been invading the program, and we've also had the introduction of Raw Underground. For those of you that can't see Andeve, he's got a smile on his face.
There's a smile, but I'm crying inside.
Yeah.
Which one do you want to talk about first?
So let's go with the ratings, shall we? So we'll be looking at the ratings to see how really these two components may or may not have affected things in recent weeks. 22nd September, 1.68 million. These are US figures, of course. 29th of September 2020, episode of Monday Night Raw, 1.82 million. That's pretty poor, isn't it?
It sounds rubbish. Especially, it depends, I suppose, how you're comparing it or what you're comparing it against. When you compare it to its heyday, it's abysmal. I mean, I suppose people are consuming the product in a different way now, but surely if you're doing a weekly show, that's where you're selling your advertising. You want people to be logging in, watching your weekly show. So yeah, those ratings are rubbish. And Retribution and Raw Underground, they sort of turned up around the same time as a shot in the arm for Raw to try and improve it. They're rubbish. Both of those ideas are absolutely rubbish.
The demo god on Twitter, you'll know that they're getting over 1 million now. So you look at Raw's 1.68, it's not that far behind, and it should be absolutely nowhere near it.
No, and we're not massive fans of AEW. We'll talk about that in a bit, I guess, as well. Dip in and out of it, but yeah, it's amazing that they're that, and I think they've beaten them in the key demo a couple of times in terms of the NXT, what demo, the demo 18 to 49, whatever it is that Jericho's the demo god of, and they've beaten the Raw demo for that week. Retribution is a stupid idea. They just come up with it on the hoof, not really thought where it's going, and then I know a few people that have said they quite enjoy Retribution because you don't know what's going to happen, and there's some good images of them chainsawing the ring and that sort of stuff, but it doesn't really make sense. They were setting fire to some sort of unit outside one week. Yeah. Unit, wasn't it? Then they're throwing Molotov cocktails and they're running around beating people up. I mean, it doesn't really make sense because surely if it's an invasion angle, the wrestlers would stand up to them and you'd see them fighting them. And then one week the Hurt Business are saying, we're going to deal with Retribution. And then they don't deal with Retribution at all. And also the Hurt Business are heels. So why would they be getting involved? We talked about before, it's incoherent storytelling. And you're not even getting decent wrestling out of it. So it's not like it's a rubbish storyline, but at the end of the day, there's a decent match coming. It just doesn't make any sense. It's incoherent, and it's not adding to better matches at the end of the day. So
yeah, it's frustrating on so many levels because I think on the positives, here are WWE trying to engage us in a different way and create and generate interest in some of their stars through different means of just bringing someone up from NXT, which is ironic in itself. But it's been so poorly thought out and so poorly executed. If you actually break it down, you had them coming in initially, as you say, maybe made for a good optics to have them chainsawing the ring, but you also had the commentators running out the arena in so-called fear of their own safety, which on the surface of it is sort of fine, don't mind that. You can't then have Retribution turning up in a match a couple of weeks later, and the commentators quite happily just sitting there commentating the match. Doesn't make any sense. You got the match itself, which was a 6-man tag against the Hurt Business.
When was this?
On Raw last week.
Oh, I can't remember it. It's been a fast forward.
So that was the lower ratings week, the 22nd of September. That was a 6-man tag against 3 of the 4 in the Hurt Business, which again makes no sense. There you are trying to build a big heel faction, and you're going to generate sympathy by putting them against the terrorist group. And they announced on Raw that they're giving them contracts, which why would you do that? That doesn't make any storyline sense to give a contract to someone that's tearing up your ring. When you actually get revealed as to who the members are, the ones that got names are T-Bar, Mace, and Slapjack. I think that's actually struck fear into your colourful shirt.
No, not at all. One of them's Djokovic.
This is going to be my final point. They're all stars that have been on TV on NXT in the last few weeks. It's Mia Yim, Djokovic. So
Well pronounced. Yeah, it doesn't make sense because that guy, he was having excellent feuds with Keith Lee and was also fighting Karrion Kross. So you don't need to do anything with him and repackage him. He's ready to go. And it also adds to, we talked earlier about the bottleneck in NXT call-ups, and this is quite clearly part of that because you're saying they obviously don't understand or don't know what they do with NXT stars. And I think you talked about it last time out when they moved them up to Raw. Is it like NXT never happened, or is NXT the stepping stone? Because now we're watching it going, well, hold on, that guy was the guy in NXT, but are we supposed to just think, well, it doesn't matter because they come? But then Keith Lee's come up and he's the same character in NXT as he was in NXT. So it's just, you say it's poorly thought out. I actually think it's worse than that. I don't think it was thought out. I think they probably went 1 week. I'd say what we'll do, because apparently Vince turns up on the day and regularly is rewriting the show up until and including during recording, which just turned up 1 week and said, listen, there's a lot of protests going on in the States. Let's tap into that a little bit and have these people come and turn up. And I don't think they even knew when they started who it was going to be. I don't think they even knew who it was going to be. And there was loads of them at one point, and some females and some smaller stars. And it's a rubbish angle. It's not interesting when it's on TV.
You can't even lean on history and say, okay, there's been invasion angles in the past that have, really gone well. If you look back to the 2001 in WCW invasion angle, that was poorly executed, and that was monumental compared to this. 2010 Nexus angle, the invasion of the initial stars there, Wade Barrett, etc. That was poorly done as well. So, what's the thinking here?
There is no thinking. They've just gone, let's do something different, and let's throw a load of mud and see if any of it sticks. Yeah. And this is just sliding down the wall, not sticking at all. And in a month's time, 2 months' time, come the Royal Rumble, are Retribution going to be around? I don't think so. And so then you've ruined another star in Djokovic, whatever he's called, because he's been repackaged. Yeah, is he doing okay? But no, he's been repackaged. So I think I just don't think there's any legs in it. It's rubbish. But I mean, at least they've got Raw Underground, which, oh no, that's rubbish as well.
Is Raw Underground any better than what they're doing Retribution? I think, again, if you start on the positives, at least they're trying to present talent in a different way. It's clearly something that Shane O'Mac is the brainchild of, is he's into that he's into the old MMA style, isn't he? But some of his commentary is absolutely dire. Just sort of mumbling away in the background.
I think probably Raw Underground is worse than Retribution.
Yeah.
And I've seen some people suggesting that it's okay and it has potential, and that's probably fair. But what you're doing if you're suggesting that it has potential and looking at it like that is you're actually thinking about what it might be rather than what it actually is or what it might become, because there is some merit in what they're doing and they might be trying to do, and it's a shift from traditional wrestling and there's a different style and setting and a name and all that, and fine. But actually, if you look at what we've had so far with Raw Underground, Shane's been off TV since what was the greatest wrestler in the world or something, whatever. And he turns up out of nowhere on Raw. There's no explanation as to why Raw Underground exists or what it is or who it's for. And all we really know is it's behind a door that has some smoke, and in the first couple of episodes has a
bouncer,
semi-scantily dressed women and some smoke coming out and a big guy guarding the door that Shane fist bumps. So don't really know what it is, except that anyone can drop in. It's in a warehouse, different sorts of warehouse. And then for the most part, we've had off-screen talent turn up and have short fights, which haven't been that interesting because they're so short. And like you say, Shane's commentating, like, he can just shut up. We don't need that. We'll watch it, thanks. Ziggler turns up and gets beaten up. You've got the Hurt Business that come in there one week and then disappear. And you've got Baszler, who you could have really put in that environment, but they didn't really do anything with. So at least with Retribution, you can see what it is. But what's this? What are they fighting for? What does it take them? Why do they fight in there? And what does it have to do with the main roster and the WWE program? Why does Shane lead it? And I think the tagline Shane keeps saying is, I say anything can happen on WWE Raw Underground, but nothing really has happened. And that's before, about halfway through, I guess. But that's before you get to the fact that they're not addressing the issue that, or that doesn't address the issue that work shoot fighting undermines what's happening on and highlights further that what is being happening on TV, the work fighting, it sort of makes it seem uncredible. So they're sort of tacitly suggesting the main roster stuff is poor, and now we're going to undermine it with Raw Underground. So for me, that's for those reasons is rubbish. And I could tell you how I would rebook it, but probably want to say something.
No, it's a great point, though. You are sort of undermining the business entirely, aren't you? Because wrestling is a total work, and everyone knows everything about wrestling is a work. But you're then trying to say, here's this stuff over here that's actually a bit better.
Yeah, exactly.
Except there's nothing about it that's better. So where does that leave wrestling?
It was sort of fighting a trampoline. It's just some pots and pans in the background. It doesn't.
So we've had our first breakout star, if you want to call it that, Dabba Kato, who's just broken out and was facing Strowman on the last episode of Raw Underground. Was actually absent from this week's episode, 29th of September.
Which doesn't make sense.
I think that could be COVID related.
Oh, right. That does make sense.
Yeah, and the so-called party that took place with a load of talent, and so it was scrapped.
Right. I mean, there is the semblance of a good idea, but actually people that are saying it's good are working so hard to try and justify why Raw Underground is any good, when actually you can quite easily say, yeah, I can understand the idea here. There's a nugget of a kernel of an embryo of an idea, but if I was rebooking it, I'm going to rebook it. You just have Shane return after months of being away and link his absence to this and directly address the audience. You say, look, Raw's ratings are rubbish. I've come here to do a breakaway, this new fresh scene, and we're gonna build it over the next few weeks. And you can see him go and recruit participants. Say, look, you've not been getting a look in, Ziggler, or you, Viking Raiders, whatever you're called this week. Come and have a look at what I'm offering you. And then you have Raw Underground debut, and you slowly have people fighting within a storyline. So you could have had Jackson Baszler when Jax was suspended, or Ziggler's had enough of being overlooked, and I'm going to show I can actually wrestle here. Whatever it doesn't matter what it is, but it could be a vehicle for driving matches and wrestlers that are struggling in Raw. And then after a few weeks, you get some animosity between the wrestlers in Raw Underground who are like, well, actually, we're legitimately over here beating the hell out of each other while you're in that ring not delivering. And then you get a sort of conflict or invasion angle, and some people want to go back to Raw and show how good they are, and others in Raw want to leave and go to Raw Underground because Shane's going to pay loads of money, and it's real fighting. And then you have conflict on Raw between these two factions, and then you have a lengthy program, differing brands. You can see him turn up on NXT and say, why don't you come fight for Raw Underground? And then you've got this semi-invasion style angle. You can build up some factions. You've got groups, wrestlers, matches. You know why Raw Underground exists. It feels legitimate part of Raw, and it pushes forward storylines and wrestlers, which is basically what you want. But instead, what we actually have is this backyard wrestling happening with no explanation, direction, or purpose. And as it is, it's not well implemented. I think it's too late to save it, and I think it'll be gone again, like Retribution by the Rumble angle. But you can see with the two, with Retribution and Raw Underground, there's something there, but it's just rubbish.
Yeah, I mean it's our program, so we can rebook whatever we want, as you have done. So,
yeah. Well, I just think when you talk about it, and when you mentioned and you think about Raw Underground, it's just an instantly fast forward moment of the show. And again, I think similar to the pay-per-view, if you don't see it, what do you miss out on? I haven't seen Raw this week, or all of it. What do you miss out on? And what's the storyline? It's incoherent. It's not a bad storyline. It's incoherent. There you go.
I haven't got much more to add to that. I would agree. Should we move on?
Yeah, that's fine. Let's leave Raw Underground in the dustbin.
Okay, second part of having our finger on the pulse this week. We couldn't let this one slide by. Our good old friend Dave Meltzer has another 5-star rating for a match that's recently taken place. Match in question was over at AEW on AEW Dynamite, 16th of September. It was a parking lot brawl between Ortiz and Santana of the Inner Circle. That's Jericho's faction. Tell you what, talking about factions, AEW, almost everyone is in a faction.
Yeah, loads of them. I don't watch it, but every time I see it, you're part of this faction. Some of them wear dinosaur masks, and then others are in a private party, and some are elite, and some are in a circle, and some are all elite. And some are at wedding.
Imagine watching that if you weren't into wrestling. It'd just be so hard to get your head around. But anyway, I digress. Ortiz and Santana, they fought best friends in a parking lot brawl. There was some semblance of a build for this. Ortiz and Santana were the heels, and they set a luggage on fire that belonged to best friends. One of the best friends' mother has been involved in the storyline about how they need their mum or whatever. And of course, she turns up in some form in the match. Nevertheless, Meltzer has given this match 5 stars. So we thought we'd have a bit of discussion on it. Firstly, Andeve, the match itself. You've seen it?
Yeah, I was directed to it by yourself, who said there's a 5-star match on AEW, the first one since the pandemic, or in the empty arena period, whatever we're calling this. So I'm glad you told me which one it was as well, because otherwise I've had to watch all of the shows and be buried in some of that nonsense. But then also I don't think I'd have found it. I mean, I'd have probably stopped because I'm a spot monkey and it's in the parking lot. But I'm shocked that is a 5-star match. I'm really shocked. Obviously, I'm watching it. I saw something. His mum's in at the end or something. She drives him off in a camper van or some RV. I didn't. And they mentioned on commentary that it was something to do with his mum. So they were fighting in a parking lot. Fine, sort of thing you do at primary school. But anyway. I'm obviously watching it devoid of knowledge in terms of the storyline and the build-up. I'm watching them week in, week out. So, of course, that's always going to diminish the match. But you can still turn up. And I remember watching Gargano, might even be on the 5-star list, but Gargano Andrade a couple of years ago, having not seen any build-up, and watching that match and just going, what on earth is this? This is amazing. So I watched this knowing that it was a 5-star. And a Dave Meltzer 5-star. There's a few good moments under the car bonnet, getting smashed around, and the end, the 2 spots for the end. I was like, blimey, that looks heavy. So I thought, yeah, it's all right. But if you'd have said to me, how many stars has that match been given? I'd have 3. Just what? Who's given that 5? And then Orange Cassidy turned up. I thought he was still swimming around in Mimosa with Jericho. I mean,
he won that match.
Just for me. I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand what a 5-star match is if that is a 5-star match. Did I enjoy watching it? Yes. Is it a 5-star match? No.
Yeah. It just incredible, isn't it? I mean, what constitutes it? I mean, if you actually look down the list at some of the other 5-star matches that Meltzer has rated, most of them, of course, biased towards Japan.
Yeah. Or maybe that's just what he likes, I guess.
Well, yeah, of course. And he is Dave Meltzer. He's been around since forever. And that's that. So the stats are there, though. Will Ospreay has been in 12 5-star matches.
Most of those in the last 18 months as well, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so quite incredible, really. But of course, Meltzer's well involved with the AEW scene. He helped set the company up. He's close with the Young Bucks, who, of course, are executive vice presidents and responsible for a lot of the booking of the show. So you can sort of see how this winds up in the category. But the fact that they've gone for this particular match baffles, really, when there has been some good matches on AEW. They have some decent stars. MJF.
Yep.
It's a bunch of talent.
MJF's good.
Yeah, of course, Jericho's there making it.
He's looking a bit fat, I thought.
Yeah. There's a few others knocking around. Britt Baker's excellent on our side. She's just come back from injury. But anyway, again, digress. So we thought we'd have a quick look at some of the other 5-star matches. Mentioned a couple already in recent times. We had the NXT takeover at New Orleans a couple of years ago at Mania. The match Adam Cole, EC3, Gaines, Sullivan, Ricochet, Velveteen Dream. It's also a 5-star match. Andrade against Johnny Gargano was NXT takeover.
Yeah, that's the one I think I was talking about. Yeah,
that's the one.
And it also isn't our man Jayaka? I mean, I can't pronounce it, but you can. He's on there with Keith Lee as in a 5-star match before predating NXT.
Yeah.
Maybe in Pro Wrestling Guerrilla, I think, a long time ago.
Yeah.
So there's a decent wrestler with another decent wrestler. I will just rebrand him on Raw as a T-Bar or whatever he's called. But also with these 5 stars, I've never seen Meltzer produce his criteria. It's just sort of a one-liner that 2-star matches is about as good as you can hope. 3-star matches, it's really good. 4 is like, wow, that's amazing. And then, I mean, now he goes up to, is it 7.25 his highest or something? And he justifies that Omega Okada series. But he justified that. He said, it's easy to explain. My daughter asks me, I said to my daughter, my daughter says to me, if something gets better, you obviously give it more points, and these matches are getting better. But I mean, I don't think he really understands how assessment works, because you can't get a score higher than the assessment's out of. No. And then to come back to the I was going to say the Young Bucks, but to come back to Ortiz and Santana, that parking lot match, JR said it was the best street fight he'd ever commentated on, and he was commentating on, just off the top of my head, Triple H and Foley at the Rumble in a street fight that was eminently better. So I wonder if there's, obviously JR's got to say that because he's in the mix, and maybe, as you're suggesting, Meltzer is also in the mix, which is why Cornette is so angry at him, because he's lost his principle for his to push his company. But it can't be a 5-star match, can it?
I don't think so. I mean, if you're giving that 5 stars, my God, what else do you need to give 5 stars?
Yeah, well, that ladder match then suddenly 8 stars, isn't it? Clash of Champions.
My criteria for this would be there needs to be a decent build. You factor in the build before you actually get to the match itself. 2 stars that are prepared to sell. You need 2 stars that are arms in seats for normal times. And then you're into your move sets and your in-ring dynamics and how well they time and flow. Like, it's not difficult, is it? That's your criteria.
Yeah, I mean, I've got just, I actually don't use it. I have my own criteria for how I watch matches and would judge if they were any good or not against a percentage system that I just have for my own amusement and no one's interest. But certainly, if you're giving matches those grading, there must be something that sits underneath it. And I suppose with Meltzer, with his years of experience, he has the granularity of understanding to know that, and just he can tell you that's because it feels it. And actually, what he's doing there is judging matches comparatively against others. But that's just it's not a 5-star match. But I suppose it is because it's up to him. So, fine. I guess it depends how much credibility you think he has. I suppose he's got lots of credibility, but maybe he's losing a little bit if he's giving those 5-star matches.
Okay. Should we move on?
Yeah, sure.
All right, section 3, Wrestling Rebooked, putting wrestling into submission. All right, it's time for our doc in review, final part of the episode. And today we found an excuse to review and profile the Road Warriors, aka the Legion of Doom, after the passing of Animal at the age of 60. So we've been having a look back over their career and watched a documentary on the WWE Network, watched a couple of their matches as well, and thought we'd just pick out some major talking points. And we thought there's no better starting point for the Road Warriors than to just have a little peruse through their history and their accolades, if you will. So the Road Warriors, highly influential in terms of their influence in the tag team scene through the late 70s and certainly all the way through the 80s. And so here we go. NWA tag team title holders, AWA. They then went on to the Georgia Championship Wrestling in 1984. They were 3-time champions there. They won the Jim Crockett Promotions Cup, which was a big deal back in the day, 1986. They're in the NWA Hall of Fame as of 2012. They were the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Tag Team of the Year, 83, 84, 85, 88. They are WWE, of course, 2-time tag team champions and in the WWE Hall of Fame. Here we go again, the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Awards. They were Rookies of the Year in 83, Tag Team of the Year 84. And the list goes on. Initial thoughts, Andeve, on the Road Warriors?
So I think them as a team, it's interesting that Briscoe on the documentary talks about them being a new breed of street brawlers. And actually thinking about, but he's saying they're a new breed, and obviously that's early on in their career. There hasn't really been anyone like them since. So the Dudleys are pretty hard hitting, but they're not the same at all as the Road Warriors. And Hayes and Ross both talk about them as being pretty nasty guys, not as in outside the ring you can talk to them, but nasty guys in the ring, and how they carried out and orchestrated their stuff. And if you're getting hit by them, you're getting hit by them. They're working stiff before working stiff was a thing. I think one of the things that strikes me as a team is their commitment to the gimmick. Didn't have to be commitment to the gimmick because it was them. So they talk about training in the documentary. They talk about the training at the gym they did originally and how they were bouncers in the bar at Grandma B's, just throwing people around and fighting biker gangs, and then transitioned into wrestling. So as a team, very, very authentic in their sort of homage to what they were doing in real life, which is maybe why they lasted the course. And Jim Ross talks about them as the most enduring tag team of all time because of the length of the spell they had at the top. And as you say, they're in AWA, NWA, WCW, WEW, WEW, what's that? WWE. So one of the giants of the tag team, one of the giants of wrestling, and one of the tag teams of the giants of tag team wrestling for certain.
Yeah, I think their career has been quite incredible. I have my memories kind of split two ways here. I have my memory of them as a kid and how much I enjoyed watching them, and then my retrospective opinion of them from looking back through the archives, learning and understanding a bit more about the business as I've got older. And in actual fact, if you look at those two legit massive guys, absolute tanks,
and in good shape as well. And in good shape, even as long ago as that. Yeah,
incredible shape. And if you look at what else was going on in the business around the time that they broke in, I correct myself, it was actually around sort of 83, 84, not the 70s, then you could see who the other champions were. The champions have been around for 5 or 6 years, and no one looked like the Road Warriors. They just absolutely came in and transformed the tag team division to the extent where, in this sort of wrestling boom in the States in the late 80s, they were at the top of the card. And that's saying something for a tag team, to have tag teams main eventing massive PPVs, Starcades, Halloween Havocs of this world, Great American Bash, all those big PPV events outside of WWE, WWF at the time, was quite something. When they were, I mean, those matches with Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, Four Horsemen, of course, of Flair. And
there's Russian Boys, Heart Foundation.
Yeah. So, just incredible. That really was the peak of their powers. Of course, when they get to WWE and they can become a bit more colourful, a bit more cartoon-like, I think they have a different sort of appeal. But even then, they carried that off as well. It was quite interesting to see how they matured through their career.
Hayes actually talks about them when and you're right, when you rattle off the list of who they've fighting in, Midnight Express all the way up to and including Heart Foundation. Hayes says that actually with the Road Warriors, the program was built around them as a tag team rather than the belt. They didn't need the belt, and obviously I've said before that I actually think everything should be about the belt, but they were so engaging, such a draw that you could build stuff around them. And the fact that they bounced through all those, I think they hold titles in all territories that they're in, and they do work in New Japan. They're probably their worst work is in WWE, WWF. Most of the work is before that. So actually, as a team, they're a colossus. Yeah.
They did spend time in Japan. So in between the two WWE runs, so post 92, after SummerSlam 92 in the UK, Hawk then, after having lots of troubles with issues,
living to excess.
He went to New Japan 92. They had that run in 92, and Hawk was fighting with a few different other Japanese talent, and then they came back to WWE around Attitude Era time. But anyway, any favourite matches for you?
One that instantly stands to mind is the one where Jim Cornette busts his knees, which is shown in the documentary. Which is funny because it's Cornette. He couldn't see without his glasses on or something.
And didn't tell his wife.
Is it scaffold? The scaffold.
Match.
I don't actually know when that match was, but that stands out as what on earth's going on there.
Yeah, it's August 1986. Starcade.
86.
Yeah,
as long ago as that, because then I think the other one, probably because of where we're recording from, but the 92 SummerSlam where they come to the ring on those bikes, that also stands in the memory, and that's a long time. I suppose that's what's that? Do my maths there. 6 years later. Yeah,
fantastic, and of course. Hawk is totally out of it in that match. SummerSlam 92 is falling about in the ring. Absolutely. Yeah. If you go back and watch that match, you'll see him just in a total daze. Animal totally carries him through that. At the start, the scaffold match, fantastic. If you actually watch that match and see how wide the actual scaffold is that they're standing on, it's absolutely ridiculous. But a very slow match as well, but still. I
suppose it has to be when you're walking a tightrope that high and you weigh that much, 295 or whatever it is they are.
Yeah. Fantastic for its era. I think for me, it's not even a match that they were in, but the role that they played at the time in the business was hugely influential. SummerSlam with the 2 out of 3 falls match between Demolition and the Heart Foundation, Legion of Doom interrupt to a massive pop, costing Demolition the title. Of course, Animals and Hawk's best mate is in Demolition, Barry Darts, for the Hearts to win that. That was huge. And the scaffold match, of course, would be up there as well.
It's interesting that you refer to Demolition, because obviously Demolition was sort of rip-off copycats. And one of the things it says in the documentary is they tried to create teams like the Road Warriors, like Legion of Doom, but actually they weren't a gimmick creation. That was them, and they were just living it in the ring, whereas Demolition was very much modeled on trying to be a gimmick. And I think one of the things that really came across on the documentary or sort of reminded me was that the team was very much about them, whereas DX you have different incarnations, and you have Michaels and Rude, China and Triple H all the way to how it ends up with Triple H and his DX army. Actually, the Road Warriors, Legion of Doom, whatever, are very much, it's about those characters, Hawk and Animal. And when they try, and that's sort of really accentuated when they try and bring Droz in, and he just doesn't fit and he can't take it on. And then later on, they try and bring in Heinrich. I think that's his name, Heinrich, with Animal. And again, he doesn't quite fit. And so the gimmick of the tag team is not a gimmick because it's them. And it's very much everything is invested in them and about them and because of them. And again, that adds, when you think about their longevity and all the tag teams they're clashing with, it shows how much of a colossus of a team they are. And it also spotlights how ridiculous and low key the tag team is today by comparison.
Yeah, you've stolen my thunder there. That's exactly the point I was going to make about connecting to what we see in today's product. I think the introduction of other members was mostly due to Hawk's issues with the bottle, with the drugs, etc. I think they were just literally trying to cover him and give some longevity to the team. But it's hard to believe, again, to link it back to today. There's no way Vince or any of the executives at WWE would tolerate that now. You'd be straight out, but back then, obviously they saw value and money.
Interesting that, I mean, this is an episode, the name of our last episode, but there's a paradox there in that they sort of don't tolerate it yet. I think we talked about this before as well. Jeff Hardy's back with his addiction issues, and they build it into a storyline and have him fighting in a bar match. And actually, come the end of Hawk's, well, it's actually towards the end of his life, but towards the end of his run, they actually play on the fact that, and Animal says in the documentary, it was pretty dark and it was hard to embrace as a storyline. They actually play on the fact that he's got addictions and issues and problems. And so, on one hand, WWE is saying, don't do this. We don't condone it, which of course, is the right thing to do. But then another, we will build it into a storyline. So, you can't have your cake and eat it, or whatever the phrase is.
Michael Hayes makes that exact point, doesn't he? About the, whether he's at the time in 2005, he's a WWE official or not, but about the issues with addiction are the person, not the business.
Which of course is true, but everything is context based, and traveling around. I think Animal says sometimes you should just see Hawk disappeared, and Jim Ross says it's okay to have a few beers with your mates, but it's not okay to have a case of beer with some mates, then go to another place, have another case of beer, and all that sort of stuff. But luckily, they say never injured anyone as far as they know, which obviously is a positive.
In terms of the actual documentary itself, I thought it was quite interesting. Obviously, that documentary was shot in 2005 and pretty much narrated by Animal, of course, who has just passed himself. And so you have that kind of interesting presentation of someone so close to Hawk, which is the main driving force for the documentary in the first place. So that made for interesting viewing, and then of course all of the kind of bit part characters around it. You've already mentioned Michael Hayes, Jim Ross, John Laurinaitis, of course, is Joe's brother, Animal's brother. So it made for an interesting presentation.
It was
I think just one final point I would make is the one thing they didn't really talk about too much, which if you kind of read around the subject, you get the impression is that Hawk and Animal were never keen to sell for anyone. And that was always a complaint that came from a lot of other tags, that they were very stubborn in the booking committees. They went to book their own matches and make sure they never really sold for anyone. And were very precious about who they put over.
Classic Hulk Hogan. Yeah, that's interesting. Although I suppose the business worked a little bit differently then. I suppose also that they're not a gimmick. So they're like, hold on a second, we're two 295, 280 pound guys and go around and smash people about. We fought in bars for real. Why would we go in and lose to this team here who can't compete with us physically? So yeah, I think that's fair enough. One other thing I noticed from the documentary is that you also, I could argue, they're the original anti-heroes. I actually tend to think of Stone Cold Steve Austin as the sort of first anti-hero, but I think they were cheered everywhere they went. And I think 88, 89, if they're in WCW at that time or whatever it was, then they tried to turn them heel, and then they quickly the following year had to turn them face because they kept getting cheered. So they're almost like the original sort of stuff that you turn someone heel and then they turn that's what makes them face, which has obviously happened many times since. But the documentary as a whole, I think those older ones are slightly better. I think that the older ones about the older stars, because of the footage and the business back then, how different it was, I think they're slightly better than the ones today, which are very polished, very clearly micromanaged, and which is why Dark Side of the Ring is such a refreshing, has been a refreshing couple of series, because it's so carefully polished and managed that you're sort of, hold on, am I watching a documentary here? Or am I watching some WWE slant? So I actually think, even though it's a WWE documentary, because it's 15 years old now, it actually is a very, very good watch compared to what you might see today.
One of my notes as well, exactly the same. They don't make him like this anymore. The documentary style, format, even down to the actual content, totally different. You look at some of the WWE 24 episodes on the styles. I mean, they're good, enjoyable watch, but they are so refined, so polished. And even though it's under the guise of, hey, here's an insight into what goes on in AJ Styles, for example's life and career, it's so contrived versus the exposure that you're getting for watching something like the Road Warriors in their career.
And I suppose the obvious one is that the Undertaker recent documentary for 6 episodes, which probably could have been done in 3, and you didn't really have even though it was the Undertaker breaking kayfabe, that's why it was amazing, but it should have been more amazing, and there was something less raw about the Undertaker documentary. It was more polished, and you sort of lost a bit of the emotional connection that you get when you're watching that Road Warriors documentary. Yeah,
totally agree. Episodes 2 and 3 of Wrestling Rebooked, if you wanted to hear our thoughts on Dark Side of the Ring. Okay. God, we've been talking for a while.
So it feels like that. We're still talking about Raw Underground.
WrestlingRebooked@gmail.com if you want to shoot at us. Till next time.
Time to tap out.